Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle Podcast. I'm John Schmeelk. It's all brought to you by PSEG, energy efficiency for game time and anytime. Visit pseg.com/Giants for discounts, rebates, and home energy assessments. In this week's spotlight from the Draft Network, friend of the program, he's Joe Marino. Joe, what's going on, man?
Hey, John, thanks for having me on. Hope you're doing well.
And tell the folks about your podcast too.
Yeah, appreciate that. Draft Dudes is the podcast. We talk draft all year long. Roster construction, we focus a lot on that. And obviously the Giants are a fun team for us because of a new regime and a lot of draft capital and real shift in identity. So we love talking about that. And of course, Locked On Bills, daily podcast and the Buffalo Bills.
All right, guys, make sure you go check those out. I know a lot of stuff's happening with free agency, franchise tags, Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley. We're going to focus on the combine on this podcast. We'll do a different huddle later in the week where we're going to cover all that stuff in terms of the Giants and their free agency needs and what they're doing salary cap wise coming up next week. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And if you missed it, go check out all the content we had from the NFL Combine. 4 episodes rather, Big Blue Kickoff Live, 7 Giant Huddle podcasts, over 25 guests. Daniel Jeremiah, Charles Davis, go down the list. A lot of good guests out there. So make sure you go find those again on the Giants Huddle podcast or on Big Blue Kickoff Live. All right, Joe. And folks, by the way, we're going to do kind of a Giant-centric review of the Combine here. If you're looking for a more general thing, go find Draft Season, our draft podcast, me and Tony Pauline, that posted on Monday. We kind of go down everything that happened, every position at the Combine. We're going to kind of zero in here on the Giants specifically with Joe. All right, so Joe, let's start here with the wide receivers. Giant fans looking for weapons. How, if at all, do you think what happened at the wide receiver position over the weekend might change what that top of the board looks like for a lot of teams?
Yeah, the wide receiver position is very interesting when it comes to this draft. And you got a lot of smaller receivers, and you got a lot of questions about the ones you'd actually pick in the first round. I feel like the one guy that if you made me say, I think this is going to be a first-round receiver, it's probably Jackson Smith and Jigba out of Ohio State. For as much hype as Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson had this past year coming out of Ohio State, that guy outproduced him on the same team 2 years ago. He just was hurt this past year when you get a chance to see him, but looked good at the combine. He feels like the guy that's going to go in the first round. Meanwhile, Jordan Addison out of USC really liked the player, but came in small, tested a bit slow. You have some questions there. You know, Quentin Johnson, the TCU receivers, the bigger bodied guy, don't have a 40 on him, obviously did some good things at the combine still. But I think we came away with more questions about the value of receivers than anything. And what's interesting about the wide receiver position in general is the NFL has been so good at finding impact players outside of the first round at wide receiver. Think about some of the best guys in the league, whether that's a Deebo Samuel or a DK Metcalf or an A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin. I could go on and on about these players that weren't first round picks that the NFL has been able to find on day 2 and really find some value there. And I wonder if you're looking for a receiver, if the better option is to wait and see if you could take advantage of some of those guys that are going to inevitably be there on day 2. Even look at George Pickens last year, guys like that. The list really does go on and on.
Yeah, and let's touch on both those tiers of guys. You mentioned the guys at the top first. Now, the Giants have Wan'Dale Robinson, who used a second-round pick on last year. Now, he tore his ACL, but I still think the expectation is he'll be back. And I think both of us would agree that he should be considered pretty much a slot-only guy, right? So keeping that in mind, Joe, based on what we saw athletically from the guys, and I agree, I thought even though Smith and Jigba didn't run a 40-yard dash, his 3-cone and short shuttle was immaculate. He looked great in drills, good hands. Mm-hmm. We know he can get open. Do you think he's a slot-only guy? Who mixes and matches with what the Giants already have to maximize that value of a receiver in the first round if they decide to go in that direction?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And with Jackson Smith and Jigba, that's the thing is we don't really know how explosive he is in terms of speed vertically. I have my concerns there, although he's quicker than fast, and we certainly validated that at the combine. But the production really did come from the slot at Ohio State, right? And I think that it opens up some questions about being able to win outside, and really that becomes a heavyweight fight out there where you have to deal with contact at the line of scrimmage. You don't have that two-way go from the slot, and it's just a different ball game out there. Now, where I want to go with this, and somewhat cautiously, is Justin Jefferson, because that was the big thing with him coming out of LSU was, well, all this production came from the slot. Can he be a big boy and win outside? Well, I think we've learned. So I don't want to fall into those same pitfalls and assume that because JSN hasn't really been tasked with winning on the line of scrimmage, that he can't, right? I think the way that the NFL is played now, this is kind of a concern that we got to be careful not to buy too much into, or else you're going to label Justin Jefferson a slot only, and you're going to pick Jalen Reagor in front of him. So I think you got to be careful there. But I do think when you look at through the lens of the Giants, I certainly Isaiah Hodgins, a player that you would anticipate is back in a big part of that offense with the flashes that he showed across 10 games this past season. Wan'Dale Robinson, more of a slot only. So I think what you're looking for is a guy that is more do everything, that gives you some interchangeability. You can play him in the slot, you can play him out wide, can get vertical, can uncover quickly. And I think that's kind of the skill set that it feels like this Giants receiver core is missing if you're counting on Hodgins and Robinson to kind of be back as your X receiver and your slot guy.
Now, I will say this. I don't think Smith and Jigba would run Jefferson's time in the 40 either when he runs it. So I agree with you. That's the receiver that they need. Does that wide receiver exist in this draft, Joe?
That's tough. And I think my hesitation there should tell you some things there, right? Even if you go to a Quentin Johnson, what type of quick separation skills does he have, right? It's going to be a big difference coming from the Big 12 and beating press coverage as opposed to in the NFC East, right? So there's some translatability concerns that you can have there. And I don't know that there's a slam dunk, okay, this is a do-everything guy, because the more you get into the class, a lot of these guys are smaller, right? And so you have questions about whether or not they can be a consistent guy that, can get that leverage at the catch point and win. Like, it's just a really unique year for receivers where it feels like the better thing is if you want more than niche player. Do you want the slot only? Do you want the big bodied guy? The teams that are looking for, hey, a do everything player, you're going to find yourself with some challenges here. And I'm not saying that the player doesn't exist, but to me, it's more, okay, you really have to get into it. You need to learn about what they were asked to do in college and the sight adjustments and the routes, right, to get a better feel about that translatability. And, of course, the Giants and the rest of the NFL had a big opportunity at the Combine to get to ask those questions and get to meet with these players.
Yeah, for Giant fans, I might not be familiar. Zay Flowers is going to be a really good receiver, 5'9". Tank Dell going to be a really good wide receiver, 5'8". Josh Downs going to be a really good wide receiver, 5'9". Even, a guy like Charlie Jones, who I love, he's only 5'11", 175, right?
Marvin Mims.
Can he play outside? Jalen Hyatt told teams over the weekend, I'm told, that he wants to play the slot, which is crazy for a guy that runs a 4.4 40. So, Michael Wilson, right? He's a late round pick with injury. He's a little bit bigger. Cedric Tillman, maybe. Again, they both ran the 4.5s, but at least they have the size to play outside. You talked about waiting, right? Maybe this is the year you wait to find a guy on day 2, early day 3, Joe. Who are some of the guys that you might like in that range that could maybe fill the type of role we're talking about?
Yeah, a player that immediately comes to mind for me is Puka Nacua out of BYU. We didn't get any testing from him, but as far as a guy that I think is interchangeable, route running, physicality, has some juice about him, I think he fits that criteria. I like Rashee Rice. I think that might be a name we're forgetting a little bit in this wide receiver class out of SMU. Really productive couple of seasons. SMU obviously put some good players into the league at that position, whether it's Emmanuel Sanders or Cole Beasley. Recently, Danny Gray looks like he could be a find there. But he's a guy that I think has shown to be able to win outside and in the slot. He's been able to get down the field, really competitive guy at the catch point. Maybe not super twitched up, but I mean, some of the best receivers in the NFL aren't necessarily great testers when you think about a Devontae Adams or a Steph Diggs or a Cooper Kupp, right? Like, you don't have to run 4.3 and be 6'2 to be a good receiver in the NFL. In fact, most of the time that's not the case. And so I think Rashee Rice also kind of fits that area as well. Marvin Mims, a player, he's 5'11", 183, so he's not super, rocked up in terms of size, but maybe he can add a little bit of weight and you can feel better about him as a more complete player. And there's some, with Marvin Mims, I don't want to get too crazy here, but there's some Jahan Dotson to his game where we saw him at Penn State with just how good he is at the catch point, but also has some explosiveness to go with it. We got a limited sample size of testing for him. He ran in the 4.3s, 6'9", 3 cone, almost a 40-inch vert. So I think there's a lot to like from him out of Oklahoma.
Yeah. Anyone else that kind of jumped out at you or surprised you testing wise at the Combine, where based on your tape study, you're like, wow, I did not expect that, good or bad?
Are you opening this up to all positions, or are we sticking at receiver?
Let's stick receiver for now.
All right, because that took. I was going to go into Jack Campbell a little bit there.
Oh, don't worry, we'll get there.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. Maybe a guy that surprised me a little bit was Xavier Hutchinson out of Iowa State, who might also kind of fit this description. With him, the explosiveness was in question, and we got a 4.53 40-yard dash. We didn't get great vertical or broad, but some of those agility scores for him, and particularly the 3-cone being a 6.91, is definitely a test that stood out to me and suggests that he's got that ability to get in and out of breaks, and you feel better about that separation ability translating to the next level. So that's probably the guy that, at least from a positive perspective, really gave me something that I didn't fully expect.
Yeah, I don't think he separated all that well in Mobile, to be honest with you. I thought he was fine down there, but I agree with you. I was surprised at how well he did from an agility standpoint as well. One guy we haven't even mentioned, I don't think, is Addison, except for your point at the beginning, Joe. His testing, and then he kind of, stepped aside. I think he said it was a back injury, right? Whatever it was. Is he too small, you think, that can be that 3-level defense guy that can attack you? Does the 4.49 worry you? Talk to me about Addison a little bit.
You're not worried if you watch them play at Pitt or USC.
No, he's still great. He runs away from everybody.
Right. I think for most people, this was the number one receiver coming into the draft, or coming into the combine. Maybe that'll change. I wish he was a little bigger. If I'm not mistaken, he measured in the 170s. That's not a place where I really want him to be. I'd love for him to be more mid 180s, pushing 190. Wish there was a little bit more explosiveness. I didn't think he'd be a 4.3 guy, but I thought he'd be a little bit more of a comfortable 4.4 type player. I'm still optimistic. I think he's a good football player, but maybe there's a little bit of caution that naturally enters your mindset when considering him because, well, he's small and he's not as explosive as you want him to be.
All right, let's go to tight end here. So maybe you're sitting into the first round and you're like, all right, I don't like any of these receivers. Yeah. They don't fit. I feel like I can get another good one later. Make the case for me, Joe, based on what you saw over the weekend, testing-wise, why, you know what, maybe this is the year you want to take a tight end in the first round.
Well, I think in general, one of the most important talking points that we should bring up when considering investing in tight ends is the value, right? Like, you want to pay for a top receiver in the NFL, that's going to cost you $30 million a season. You want the best tight end, it's going to cost you about half of that, maybe 15 to 18, right? So that right there is really interesting to me, especially when you consider the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, not everybody gets to have Travis Kelce, right? Like every team would love to have him, but you think about letting Tyreek Hill go, of course, trading him, getting a bunch of draft capital, being comfortable paying Travis Kelce, right? And the Giants might be in this world of paying a quarterback a bunch of money here pretty soon. So you get to see how that kind of changes the roster dynamics, and you kind of look for those values. And you look at what the Chiefs did, and they were willing to say goodbye to that expensive receiver, drafted some defensive players to replace him, and then was able to kind of lean into, of course, what they're paying Travis Kelce. So I think, first of all, there's a value there at the tight end position for the contracts. But, you know, I think what offenses really want is matchups, right? You want to be able to dictate terms. And when you can put tight ends on the field that are actually skilled, that can really run routes and get open and provide a height, weight, speed mismatch to defenses that are living in sub packages, right? They're playing in nickel literally all the time, where you can force them to play uncomfortable. Let's say you have a couple of good tight ends, and I certainly like Daniel Bellinger as a young player for the Giants. Not sure that he stops you from going after one of these really, really good, talented tight ends that exist in this class, but you can start running some 12 personnel and getting defenses in uncomfortable personnel groupings that they don't live in. You know, I think you can really elevate your offense. And you've certainly seen, whether it's Mike Kafka or Brian Dable throughout their careers, with a lot of tight end background, getting good contributions from tight ends. Leaning into that might not be a bad idea for a number of reasons.
And I think the guy that gets me excited, I know we're doing a combine review here, but I'm going to bring up the guy that didn't do anything at the combine, and that was Dalton Kincaid. Yeah, I think in terms of route running, catching the football, I mean, this guy, I'm not comparing him to the Travis Kelce, but he has that character to him with the way he plays in a style where, you know, he might be listed as a tight end, but that guy's a receiver, and he could really change your offense as a 3-level target.
His game against USC this past year might be the best tight end receiving tape I've ever watched. Route running, his hands are just unbelievable. And, you know, as a guy that I think has room for some upward mobility, given, you know, his a small school player to start, basketball background, transfers to Utah, and really, really takes off. I mean, the route running and hands are off the charts. The ball skills are really, really good. I mean, you're not drafting this guy to be an inline force for you as a blocker, right? Like that's not going to be the name of the game there. You watch all of his plays, you're going to come away a little underwhelmed by his ability to, win the edge as a blocker. But you want that receiving profile. You want that move piece that you could put in the slot. You could put him out of the backfield and really get some production. That's a great name. And unfortunately, like you mentioned, whether it was a Senior Bowl, couldn't participate due to an injury, and of course now not getting any numbers from at the combine, he feels like he's a little out of sight, out of mind. But my goodness, does this guy have a bright future as a pass catcher in the NFL?
One guy that wasn't, though, and I'll get to the physical freak show in a second. I thought Sam Laporta was excellent.
Yeah.
I thought his drills were great. He came in at 6'3", 245, ran a 4.59, which I thought was a really good number for him. His 3-cone and short shuttle at 4.25 and 6.91 were fantastic. I don't think he's going to inch his way into the first round. For my money, though, you pick him in round 2. I mean, He's going to give you that type of value, at least in my opinion, and he can block for you a little bit too.
John, I'm not sure how much Iowa football you've watched over the last 2 years, but that offense is tough to watch, man.
It's rough.
But the one thing they did have was Sam Laporta, damn it, and they threw him the ball and he caught a ton of passes and was like the only good thing that ever happened when you watch Iowa play offense. And he's a really intriguing player. Like you mentioned, the receiving skill set's there. And what I can really appreciate about Sam Laporta, and we say this for a lot of players, but I really mean it for Sam Laporta. When everybody in the world knows where the ball's going and you still can't stop it, like that's a good football player. And that's what it was for Sam Laporta. But like in the most extreme example of there's nowhere else to go, we're scoring 10, 11 points a game, it feels like. But if it wasn't Sam Laporta, it was nobody. So I appreciate what he brought to that team, especially with the attention that was placed on him. Really good production with really bad quarterback play. You mentioned the blocking ability. Again, you're not drafting this guy to block, but man, his effort is really strong. Like he gets after people as a blocker. So I think he probably gives you more there than you get from a Kincaid. But I think Sam Laporta is very much that, okay, maybe we don't want to pick a first-round tight end, but we could probably feel pretty good about waiting until the second round and getting Sam Laporta as our fallback option.
Given everything we heard and people were saying how this guy was going to absolutely blow the combine up, were you a little underwhelmed by Musgrave and the numbers he put up?
No. Here's the thing about Musgrave that's interesting. I thought he was awesome at the Senior Bowl. I think everybody did. And I was at his podium session there, and he said, I still feel slow. Like he's still kind of working back. He's like,
yeah, I spoke to him one-on-one, and he said he still felt rusty. He'd only been playing for like 2 weeks. Yeah.
Right. So I kind of believe him. We're aware of the injury, but then like you did see, so the functional athleticism really showed up, and where he opens his stride, he can really pull away. But it's also just how technical he is as a route runner, really good at the catch point. Will certainly give you the blocking skills. And if I'm not mistaken, he still clocked his 40 low 4.6s.
Yeah, 4.61. Good.
Yeah,
number.
which I think is a really good time. He's good size too with him. I think the question that I have more with him, and his jumps were good, 36-inch vert and over 10 in the broad. The question that I have with Musgrave is just like, we didn't get a lot of production from you in college, right? I mean, like not a ton at all. So for as enticing as the skill set is and the physical skills and the athleticism and what we did see at the Senior Bowl, you wish that you had a little bit more resume to cling to when you talk about translating him to the NFL. But from a physical traits perspective, I really think he offers a lot.
Darnell Washington came in at 6'6", 264. And you know what? I wasn't shocked by all the numbers that I saw coming in until I saw the short shuttle time at 4:08. And I'm like, how is that even possible? Because, Joe, I got to be honest with you. Watching him doing the drills and everything, he still kind of looks like he lumbers around to me. He gets the time. It reminded me of the kid out of Virginia last year who ran the really good time, but to
Woods?
me, Jelani Woods still did not look like a super fluid guy. How Washington ran a 4:08 short shuttle, I can't even fathom it. I need to find the video of that if he teleported or what he did, because just the way I saw him moving around, I don't know how that's possible. And holy cow, if that number translates to the field.
I think with players like him, I think you're correct in that they're not necessarily moving very fast, but they're covering a lot of ground, right? With those strides and their ability to eat it up. And I think that's what you get from Darnell Washington. I think he's probably more of a gradual speed guy. And certainly I think what's most important is you go back to the tape and you don't like that speed, that athleticism doesn't show up. Just like I'd say it didn't show up for Jelani Woods.
Yeah,
It straight up didn't. But then they test like that and you realize, okay, we got something here. And so for Darnell Washington, man, he's going to be an impact blocker from day one. You see the NFL, everybody wants to run outside zone. Well, you got to win the edge in outside zone. You can do that with Darnell Washington, but also it's that catch radius. It's that ability to beat zone coverage, which really matters, right? It's one thing to be maybe not like the most explosive tight end that you don't love as a guy that's going to win against man coverage a ton, but is he smart? Can he make side adjustments? Can he sit down? Can he be available? Absolutely. And so I think that catch radius with that blocking ability, with that size, he's plenty appealing, but yeah, I mean, I think we could all agree that level of freak athlete wasn't what we saw all the time at Georgia.
How high is Tucker Kraft going to go?
It's a good question. We've got this group of tight ends, whether it's Michael Mayer, Darnell Washington, Dalton Kincaid, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft. Like this is that Sam Laporta. Like those are the guys, right? I think Tucker Kraft has some things working against him. He had a little bit of an injury this past year. Smaller school guy. I think he's probably a second-round pick. I'd be very surprised if he got to the third round. But what could work for him and him falling a little bit, if you want it, not necessarily for him, it would work against him, but for the teams that are wanting him, is you just don't see that volume of tight ends go, right? Like we don't typically see more than one first-round tight end. There's not even been that many selected recently. So there's a numbers game that probably hurts Tucker Kraft, but provides a lot of value to the NFL if he's the guy that kind of slides a little bit. Because at the end of the day, I don't think 7 tight ends are going to go in the first 2 rounds.
All right, let's go to running back and offensive line here. The Giants could be in the running back conversation. We don't know the answer to that question as per this recording on Monday. Who's the guy that maybe, and let's take Bijan and Gibbs and throw them out. Who else at the combine? Because we know they're going to be gone end of the first round, very early second round, right? Of the guys that performed at the combine, we talked about Tajay Spears a ton. He didn't really do much in Indy. Who are the guys that you like in day 2, early day 3 picks that you think kind of step in here based on what you saw in Indy that kind of impacted and you're like, oh yeah, that's, you know what, I would give him the reins and feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for that lead back, right, I think that's where the conversation gets interesting because there's a ton of guys that you feel like can be a complementary player. But if you want a guy that could really carry the load, I think after Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs, right, those are very correctly identified as 1 and 2. I think you look at guys like Zach Charbonnet out of UCLA, bigger back for him. Was he 214 pounds, 6 foot 214, ran 4.53, 37 vert, 10.2 broad. You saw the way that he won through contact with consistency at UCLA, a lot of vision there. He's a guy that you feel like can really take some volume for your offense. Kenny McIntosh is a player that I really like. I know that he ran 4.62. I know that doesn't get a lot of people excited, but watch him play. I mean, if you want a multifaceted back that can win downhill, that can catch the football, that can block, I mean, you get a lot from Kenny McIntosh, and I don't think athleticism was something that I was concerned about with him in the SEC. So I like him as if you're looking for a guy that can carry some volume for you. And then I know that Roshan Johnson has a lot of fans, and another bigger back, 6 foot, 220 pounds, ran 4.58, high character guy. You feel like he can carry some volume for you as well. I know Bijan was kind of the guy there for Texas, but a lot of people think that Roshan has starter traits in the NFL. And I think 4.5 and 220 pounds is something that as a guy that's going to take some carries for you, that's kind of what you're looking for. And that's not getting into, like you mentioned, Tajay Spears, explosive. You like him as a complimentary player. Devin A-Chain from Texas A&M, complimentary player to me, but you want that guy to take some volume. Those are some of the names that come to mind for me.
How about Chase Brown? How much did he help himself with that 4.43? We know about he had all the production you would ever want.
I mean, Chase Brown probably should have been the Heisman Trophy winner, if we're being honest, right? Like, I mean, I don't know, nobody's really going to pound the table for a running back out of Illinois, but like measure his production up against some of the other people, and he should have at least been in New York. Maybe we won't pull Caleb Williams Heisman away from him, but I think that Chase certainly had a case and was really, really productive. I think for him, the testing was really, really good. And why I think it's important is because I thought he looked very ordinary at the Senior Bowl, right? Like the season was great, and then the Senior Bowl was meh, and he comes back and tests really well, and it feels like you can kind of lean back into it a little with some confidence. But yeah, I mean the season he had this past year was phenomenal. The combine was phenomenal, and I think he's got a lot of momentum.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think so too. All right, interior offensive line, the Giants could be in that marketplace here, Joe. I don't think testing-wise anyone jumped out at me, at least at guard and center. John Michael Schmitz, is fine. Steve Avila was fine. Nobody to me really pumped. Who are some of the guys that either, listening to them or watching them doing their thing at the combine or in general that you think could be a look at guard or center that can plug and play for you on day 2?
Yeah, I think you hit some of the big names: Joe Tippmann, John Michael Schmitz, Osiris Torrance. Those are kind of your cream of the crop interior offensive linemen that I would expect to go in the back 25% of the first round into the second round as your starters. But if you want to move away from those names, one small school guy and one not small school guy, City So out of Eastern Michigan. He came in 323 pounds, almost 34-inch arms, almost 11-inch hands, ran 507, 32-inch vertical for an offensive guard at 323 pounds. He's a player that actually a former NFL player at the Senior Bowl said, "Hey, Joe, you got to watch City So," and I did. And then he did that at the combine. And so I'm really leaning into to him as a kind of a maybe a later day 2 guy that winds up being a steal for somebody. And then the UCLA guard, John Gaines II, I thought he, from a testing perspective, also really helped himself at the combine. So I think it was the names you'd expect, but if you want to go a little bit deeper, City So Eastern Michigan, John Gaines II out of UCLA are 2 guys that I think helped themselves a lot over the weekend.
Joe talked in Indianapolis about the scarcity of defensive tackles, interior defensive linemen. Trying to find somebody to go with Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams, maybe eventually step in for Leonard Williams down the road as he gets a little bit older. Who are some of the defensive tackles that you think really made a name for themselves out there that could fit that bill?
Well, I think that's, for me, Keanu Benton's the name that really, really pops out of Wisconsin. Good career for the Badgers, and then good Senior Bowl, good combine. We like where this is headed, right? Wrestling background. I think he's got the versatility to play multiple spots up front. Has some good hand usage, which is not something you're going to see at the combine, but I appreciate that about his game and some of the counters that exist with his rush profile. So he's a name. Obviously, Jalen Carter out of Georgia is a huge name. Brian Bresee, Clemson. But I'm really excited about him, Keanu Benton, and then a guy that I don't know that he did a whole lot of testing, but I know he did the bench press, Mazi Smith out of Michigan. Yeah. I think everybody's sleeping on this guy. I think he's a freak athlete that's 330 pounds, that had a great season for Michigan, that I think offers versatility. And maybe his pass rush impact in college wasn't great, but my goodness, the athleticism that he has gets me excited about translating him to the next level. And we said things like that about Dalvin Tomlinson. We said things like that about other interior defensive linemen, that Vita Vea, can he rush in the NFL? Well, yes, he can. They're big athletic dudes. And so I think Mazi Smith out of Michigan is a player that's absolutely slept on at interior defensive line, that is going to, whether that's late first round or second round, I think is a name people need to get a little bit more in tune with.
I'm going to throw a couple names at you. Give me your take. Adetamaway Adebare from Northwestern, who was unbelievable with his testing.
Crazy combine, yeah.
Yeah, ridiculous. The guy that 449 to 280 pounds, like what? And then his drill work looked good too. He looks rocked up, like 34-inch arms, like he checks every box. I know people made a big deal about Kalijah Kancey. He's 40. He has the labrum, so he hasn't done anything else really. And then I thought Gervon Dexter looked really good too as a bigger guy. Those other 2 guys kind of undersized. And I thought he flashed some pretty good athleticism for a bigger guy.
Good names to bring up. We'll start with Gervon Dexter. Yeah, the size and athleticism really popped at the combine, and that was good because I thought for 2 seasons at Florida he was really, really inconsistent. And I get concerned about Florida. Like, I don't feel like their player development for the last decade's been very good. It just feels like just a lot of just underdeveloped players. And I think that happens when you have so much turnover with your coaching staff. But He's a guy that maybe his best football is ahead of him. I do think this last 2 years of tape concern me, but again, size and athleticism is absolutely there. You mentioned Kalijah Cansey out of Pitt, and I'll tell you what, he might be the most difficult evaluation in the class because he's a complete outlier in terms of size. I mean, what was he? 6'1", 280 pounds with did he have 31-inch arms? I mean, just
they were very short. They were very short.
Just concerningly short. And you can absolutely appreciate, 30 5/8 on the arm. It's sub 31. That's crazy to me. You can appreciate the disruption and how impactful he was at Pitt, but translating that to the next level is just really, really hard for me. I think he can provide some energy, but I mean, he's going to get outreached all day long in the NFL. He's going to have to relearn how to win, right? Because just guys are going to be longer. They're going to be more stout. They're going to be able to move better in the NFL. And I think it's going to be a big challenge for Kalijah Cansey. So to me, he's a guy that I recognize the talent and the intrigue and all that, but he's probably a guy I let somebody else pick, right? Like that, you can enjoy the risk reward. I'll lean into a different player. And then the last one was out of Tommy. Yeah, man, from Northwestern. Goodness gracious. Shout out to Kyle Krabs with one of my colleagues. We do draft dudes together, and he was in on him over the summer. But I don't think anybody expected 4.4s at 280 plus pounds. I mean, that's freak stuff. That's really interesting. And I like the density of his frame. He's not super tall. So he's sub 6'2", 6'1.5". That's a lot of density to go with that explosiveness and those long arms. So, man, I thought he looked good at the Senior Bowl and had a good career at Northwestern. He is one of the biggest risers of late for sure.
I'm not sure if the Giants are going to go after another edge guy. They have Azeez Ojulari and Kayvon Thibodeau in house. But Joe Shane and his time in Buffalo, Joe, as you well know, they just kept drafting defensive linemen. It didn't matter who they had up there. They just keep going. Epinesa, Ed Oliver, Rousseau, just go down the line, right? They signed Von Miller. They just keep adding guys up front.
Doesn't stop.
Who in that group in Indy really jumped out to you that could be like, ooh, Wink Martindale? I could see him really liking that dude up front.
Funny, I keep mentioning the Senior Bowl, but man, Wink Martindale and Joe Shane were right there on the sidelines focusing on those defensive linemen too. You can tell that's something they'll be thinking about. And obviously with a bunch of expiring contracts there with a lot of the depth players, you could see them going with some defensive linemen. What's interesting is the Wink Martindale defense usually features some very stout dudes and then just guys that they can create space to unleash and attack the pocket, right? Yeah. And when you go to the edge side of things, that group really, there's so many players that I think translate to that style of defense. If you're a pure even front defense and you're looking for a true 4-3 defensive end, maybe this isn't the class for you. But if you want those guys that you can really scheme up and create some rush lanes for them, you can, and that's what Wink does, right? He's made a hell of a career out of that. You can get those players. So I think about a Byron Young from Tennessee with, burst and flexibility for days. He really, really intrigues me. Nolan Smith, I know, is a smaller player. But I think even at Georgia, you knew he was a little underdeveloped with his rush plan, but the athleticism was off the charts. He certainly validated that with his combine showing. He intrigues me quite a bit. Will McDonald, I know that he didn't do all this stuff, but as a length, burst, flexibility type guy out of Iowa State, he pops. I could really go on and on. Felix Anadiki-Uzama out of Kansas State, he really fits that type of description. So I think that the well is going to be plenty full for the Giants if they're looking for some of those slashers off the edge and then those stout dudes on the interior as well.
All right. Let's go to the middle linebacker. The Giants really don't have one. They signed Jared Davis around Christmas Eve. He's starting playoff games for them. It was ridiculous. Jalen Smith was basically picked off the scrap heap, right? He couldn't find the team. He started for them most of the year. And I don't think this is a great middle linebacker group. It would not shock me, Joe, if we don't see even one picked in the first round, even as late as the Giants are picking. I know you already mentioned one earlier, so a little tease there. What guys at the combine at that spot really jumped out at you that you think could intrigue the Giants there, either with the first round pick or maybe when they're picking in the 50s?
Yeah, I think the name's Jack Campbell out of Iowa. really good player there this past season. I think 2 years ago he showcased himself well, and I didn't love his 2021 tape, but 2022 I think he put it all together. And we're talking it's over 6'4", 250 pounds, ran 4.65. I mean, like objectively one of the best 5 combine performances of any player there. Right? I mean, just showcasing athleticism in ways that we needed to see it, because that was my question with Jack Campbell was, hey, I like your downhill ability. You're super smart. You're a good tackler. I think you have short zone coverage skill, but what type of range do you have? Well, I think we feel good about the athletic profile that we saw at the combine. And I think for a lot of teams, he's going to be a really good choice. What's interesting about the linebackers is maybe we don't have a lot of options in the draft that we love, but free agency is going to provide some answers there for teams. I mean, a lot of veterans and intriguing players there that I think offset some of what this class is missing at linebacker. And especially you think about like the top 2 guys that people talk about, Drew Sanders out of Arkansas, not necessarily a very traditional player in terms of how he won at Arkansas. I think if there were Sam linebackers in the NFL anymore, like a true 4-3
right.
Sam, like he's perfect, right? That's who you want, but like that's
He's
not
long,
a role.
He can beat up the tight end. He can set.
That's
the
not
edge,
a thing.
He can do all that. Yeah, for sure.
And then even the other guy, Trenton Simpson, we knew he's athletic, but I'm not sure he's more than just a see ball, get ball type player. Like the read and react skill there is very underwhelming. I think he's a guy that you would just give him singular responsibility, shoot this gap, cover this player, right? Pursue from the weak side. You know, I worry about the processing skills there. So that brings me to guys like Jack Campbell, who I'm really excited about today coming out of the combine, because I got an athletic profile that I needed to go with processing skills and consistent film.
Yeah, his short shuttle time and 3-cone work were fantastic, which is really important for him. And he had a solid 40 time too. Is he low 4.6s, right, Campbell, right?
Yeah,
so,
really good.
Excellent. All right, cornerback, last position we'll hit here, Joe, because I think this is probably maybe the strength of this class, in my opinion.
No question. Yeah,
and,
no question.
You know, we're flying back on Friday night, and I'm trying to keep track of these drills on my phone, and I'm like, are all these guys running in the 4.3s? How is this possible? And it was possible. They all did it. And now I wonder who's even going to be left when the Giants pick at 25.
Well, the good news about these corner classes is that there's a lot of them. And I think you're going to see them stacked up a whole lot of different ways. And obviously scheme specificity is going to come into play for what, you know, skill sets match what teams want to do. But I mean, this thing is absolutely slam full of guys. Devin Witherspoon out of Illinois, Christian Gonzalez, who's an absolute monster out of Oregon, Joey Porter Jr. For the I said the Giants for Penn State. You know, he's going to be intriguing for people.
Giant fans wouldn't mind if it was for the Giants, Joe.
If he got down there, I think that'd be a real good fit for him. You know, Cam Smith out of South Carolina looks really good. Blue Kelly, Deontay Banks. I mean, all of these players we just mentioned, those are like top 45 picks, top 50 picks, and that's just scratching the surface. So there's going to be answers here for teams, and if you need one, get one, because the well is full, and there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of different skill sets available. You
mentioned skill set and fit. You know what Wing Martindale likes to do, Joe? He wants to blitz and he wants to play man.
Yeah,
who fits?
Oh man, Devin Witherspoon, I think, is the man coverage skills there. The Giants are picking what, 25? I don't know, or 26.
Who fits that'll be there at 25?
Yeah, I know that's probably where we should focus the conversation. You mentioned Deontay Banks out of Maryland, physical. I mean, certainly got the size and athleticism to turn and carry. I really like Cam Smith out of South Carolina. I think feet and hips are really good. Ball skills, competitive toughness are there. You don't worry. He's going to be able to tackle for you. There's no questions there. And like, let's say that you miss out, you want to wait, and you got, second round pick, or the Giants have a couple of third round picks, if I'm not mistaken. Blue Kelly out of Stanford really is a good man cover corner that can tackle and has length. So there's going to be guys at all spots. And so if they don't get one at 25, it'll be all right. They'll get somebody later on.
It's funny. One guy that I watched his tape before the Senior Bowl when we went down to Mobile, and I was underwhelmed. I'm like, all right, he's 6'3", but he doesn't play like he's 6'3". He's not physical. He's inconsistent. Julius Brents. And then I thought he was pretty good in Mobile. And then his testing at his size with his agility drills, in Indianapolis, and Wink loves big, long corners. Now I'm thinking, boy, is that a mid-round fit there, given his raw skills?
Well, I really liked his game against TCU in the Big 12 championship game. So if you're looking for like his best game, that would be the one to watch. And like you mentioned, I liked him at the Senior Bowl, certainly tested really, really well. He is a player that I think is probably a better fit for zone schemes. I think for as athletic and as big as he is, I still think you want him playing, kind of in that half turn cover 3,
Yep.
Quarters looks,
Seahawks corner.
He's that, right. And you say that, but like, the Seahawks defense is now on a lot of teams, whether it's with the Jets, they got out of Sauce Gardner, I guess the Seahawks still, the 49ers, the Bills, there's a lot of teams out there that run Colts, right. There's defenses for him. He may not be the best fit for the Giants.
Fair enough. Couple other guys that impress with their testing. Keely Ringo, who I know people are all over the map on that dude.
Yeah.
He has the physical ability to play press man, but I'm not sure if he showed you he could do it yet this year. And then Darius Rush out of South Carolina, who was unbelievable in Mobile. And then, just being up close to him, he is such a big frame dude. Like, he's a big corner. He ran a 4.36, which I did not see coming. Your thoughts on those two guys?
Yeah, I didn't see that coming from Darius Rush either. I watched his tape at South Carolina, did the write-up on him, and I had athleticism concerns. And maybe that kind of comes from, sometimes players, if your play speeds and your processing speed's not there, you're going to look slow. But in an isolated situation where it's, hey, run 40 yards, do this drill, you're going to look fast, right? And I still think that his functional athleticism is different. So, I mean, I think it's good to know that he's capable of that type of athletic profile, but I didn't see it at South Carolina. And I thought of him as his own corner as well, especially when you think about the ball skills that he has. I think that you can really maximize that with him very much not having his back to the line of scrimmage with a whole lot of consistency. The other name you mentioned was Keely Ringo. Yeah, I mean, you think about the journey there. You couldn't open a mock draft over the summer without him being probably a top 10 pick, right? But I think the reality of him is it's more physical upside than it is consistency on the field. And just that reactionary ability to mirror and really feel routes and close, it's not there. I mean, like, he's got some impressive moments because of the athleticism and he makes some really exciting plays, but I don't know that he's a guy that I would label as sticky. I don't know that he's a very instinctive corner, right? And so that's kind of the stuff you might want to stay away from when you're considering a man-heavy defense.
100% agree with you. Final guy I'll ask you about at corner before I give you one generic question. DJ Turner ran a 4.26. I have not done a full deep tape study on him yet. What scheme does he fit, and is he pushing himself into the first round conversation now?
He's a man corner. So this is more along the Giants prototype. So what you're going to like about DJ Turner is he's athletic, he's got quick feet, fluid hips, sticky in coverage, and he is a dude when it comes to tackling. Like, I like my DBs to tackle. I know that that's secondary to coverage and making plays in the ball, but like, if you can come down and tackle, like, to me that matters. That's one of the biggest exceptions that I'll never forget, like CJ Henderson coming out of Florida. Like, I just couldn't get past the business decisions that guy made. And look where he's at in the NFL right now. He's kind of bouncing around a couple different teams, inconsistent. DJ Turner, let's get back to him. Really good athlete, really instinctive player, and he's a dog in terms of tackling ability. So I like him a ton. I worry about the size. We're sub 31 inch arms, 178 pounds. You think maybe at 5'11" he can add a little bit, and even if that means losing some athleticism, because I mean he's obviously super athletic. I think I'd like to see him push 185, 190 pounds, and I think he would be a really nice option for the Giants, honestly, on day 2.
All right, final question here. How did the landscape of this draft, in your eyes, Joe, change during that week in Indianapolis, if at all? You can look at it from any perspective you want, top of the draft, trade market, whatever. What was the most striking thing for you that maybe changed the way you were thinking about this draft in general?
I think for me, it's my belief that we get 4 top 10 quarterbacks has changed. I didn't think going into it, I didn't think that would happen. I thought there was enough concerns with Anthony Richardson that he would more or less be a maybe for the top 10. And you kind of thought more teams maybe trading back into the first rounds, teams that maybe weren't needing a quarterback now, but down the line would want to maybe trade back and get him or use a later first round pick on him. I think with him literally be testing at a level that we all knew he's athletic, right? That's not hard to know, but did we know he was like the most athletic quarterback ever?
Quarterback, almost player.
Right? Yeah.
Jeez, it's like, it's ridiculous.
That guy's going early. Like, and I know that like the man, he doesn't have a lot of snaps. Like there's red flags here. Let's not forget, like he's very inexperienced, weird coaching situation, super uneven play.
Inaccurate.
All of it, John. But he's like too much of a freak for a team like Seattle, right? To not pick in that top 10, right? I think he's going to do it. So I think, and that's a big fundamental shift, right? I thought maybe like kind of had to force it. Now I'm like, yeah, this guy might not only be a top 10 pick, maybe a top 5. Maybe he's a number 1 pick. I don't know, but someone's going to bet on those trades. I know it.
Joe, good stuff. Promote what you want to promote, my man.
Yeah, hey, appreciate you having me on, John. The best thing you can do, follow me on Twitter at Joe Marino, Draft Dudes Podcast, Locked On Bills Podcast, and always fun talking ball with you, John.
Absolutely. Check out Joe's stuff. Check out the Draft Network, all that good stuff. Him and Kyle do a fantastic job. Thanks for joining us on the John Settle Podcast, brought to you by PSEG. We'll see you next time, everybody.